So good afternoon, everybody. This is HATEC World. I'm Peter Morvay, and on today's program, we have Dr. Jerome Corsi, best-selling author and political commentator from the United States. Good afternoon or good morning, Dr. Corsi.
Good morning, Peter. Great pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much.
You are the author of more than 50 books, and the latest one that came out just last March is about the assassination of President Kennedy. But for the Hungarian readers, you're known about your book, in English it's called Killing the Deep State. In Hungarian, it's called Deep State Legyőzése. And maybe you have a copy of that.
Right here. And by the way, thank you for translating it.
It's been a pleasure, and it's been a privilege to translate. And I thank you for showing the book. Actually, all the books have been sold out in Hungary, and my personal copy, I was the last one I gave to my friend. So it's good to see the book again. Thank you. And we are looking forward. We are looking forward to have your other books in Hungarian. But your latest one, as I mentioned, it's about the Kennedy assassination. What is so many books have been written about this topic and this crime, this criminal act. What can be found out, and what is the message of your book that you found out the assassination of President Kennedy?
I'm going to show you the cover of the book here. I'm going to share the screen and show you the cover of the book. This is the cover of the book. It is called The Assassination of John F. Kennedy, The Final Analysis. And I wrote it with David Mantik. David Mantik is a personal friend, and he also is the co-author. He is a PhD in physics, and he also has he's a medical doctor who's been practicing radiation oncology for 5 decades now. He's in his 5th decade of medical practice. Now, what Dr. Mantik did, and you'll see the cover, has both one of the Zapruder films and one of the JFK autopsy skull x-rays. Now, the unique feature of this book is Dr. Mantik took in a densitometer, which is a scientific instrument that allows you to measure the amount of light coming through an x-ray. And millimeter by millimeter, sometimes 1/10 of a millimeter by 1/10 of a millimeter, Dr. Mantik measured every square inch of these x-rays, which permitted him to determine a couple things. Number one, there are only 3 existing JFK skull x-rays from the autopsy in the National Archives in Washington, and all 3 have been forged. All 3 have been altered to mask evidence of frontal shots. I'll show you that in a minute. But the other major conclusion, and this is scientific proof. Dr. Mantik has been publishing this now for 3 decades. He's seen the JFK x-rays more than anyone else, 9 times in the archives. Dr. Mantik's writings on his own are very scientific, and they have not gotten to the general public. So I got to know him and interviewed him a few years ago and decided to write this book with him to explain in language that anyone can read the conclusions, because they're very dramatic. If the x-rays of JFK's autopsy, if the skull x-rays are forged, that's already prima facie evidence of a crime. But more importantly, the forensic analysis of the x-rays shows that conclusively the 2 shots hit JFK from the front and 1 from the rear. This means Lee Harvey Oswald was not the lone gun assassin. So this is a very startling and important conclusion. Now, I also want to share another screen here. I'm going to switch here for a different screen to pull up one of the x-rays, which is, I think, one of the more important parts. Let me see. I have to first get it where I want it. Hold on one second. Let me find the exact place I want to be. 1 minute. So I get the Word file up here. There we go. That's the one I want to share. Now I can share that.
Yes, thank you.
And here we go. Okay, this is one of the skull X-rays. This is the skull X-ray that is what they call the right lateral. It's through the right side of the head. I'm going to increase it a little in size so you can see it a little bit better. And there we go. Now, over here on the right, this is the front of the head. And the left here is the back of the head. Now, what you can see is in this blue line, a shot hit JFK in the right forehead at the hairline, and it entered. We see the point of entry here. I'll show you, we have more detail on this, but these yellow points are highlighted. Those are bullet fragments. So the bullet entered in the right forehead, and it broke up, and it started creating a bullet trail. Now, the most important thing about this is the largest of the bullet fragments is in the back of the head. That's because the largest fragment had the heaviest weight, and it traveled the farthest, had most momentum. Secondly, it did not exit the skull. So this is unmistakable evidence of a frontal shot. Now, Dr. Mantic had concluded this. Dr. Michael Chesser also concluded it. He independently did optical density measurements of the Kennedy X-rays in the archives. And Dr. Fogarty, who was selected by Robert Kennedy Jr., also validated that this is a frontal shot. So we had 3 radiologists whose profession is to study X-rays acknowledge that this is a frontal shot. Now, that's extremely important. Also, a shot entered at the temporal bone right by the ear, right about here. There's a keyhole fracture here by the ear. This is the petraeus bone, which is the densest bone in the body. And it blew out the back right of Kennedy's head. In fact, there's a missing piece of skull. That was the Harper fragment that flew off of Kennedy's head onto the south side of Dealey Plaza. The one shot there, and it shot through the windshield. So we identify from the X-rays 3 shooters, one on the grassy knoll that hit the ear and blew out the back of the head, one across the other side of Dealey Plaza, above the triple and under overpass by the railroad yard. That's the shot that came through the windshield. The forehead shot could have been by either one of those 2. And there's also, if I go back to the what the cover of the book shows, it shows again that we have the shots that were 3 shots. Hold on a second. At 3 shots that were for one that occurred. The first shot was from the back of the head. And that shot was one that hit Jack Kennedy in the back of the head at a low angle. So it was not from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository where Lee Harvey Oswald was supposed to be. It hit the back of the head. It pushed Jack Kennedy's head forward. And Zapruder's film is at Zapruder frame 313. And the right part of Jack Kennedy's head kind of bursts open. You can see the blood matter coming out in a spray going forward. Within a second or 2 at the most, the red arrow hit at the ear, and this right here, this particular keyhole fracture, and it blew out the right back of JFK's head. That splattered across the back of the car. I'll show you a couple of Zapruder films of how the splatter occurred. And the shot in the blue arrow could have occurred almost simultaneously with the red shot. And it, again, stayed in the top of the head. Again, here, this picture, you can see even more clearly the 3 shots. I'm going to increase the size here. Now, what this means is that if, in fact, you have a frontal shot, it could not be Lee Harvey Oswald, because Lee Harvey Oswald was shooting. I don't think he actually shot anything, but when the shooting occurred, Jack Kennedy's limousine was already past the Texas School Book Depository. So Texas School Book Depository was behind Jack Kennedy. Frontal shots mean that there were multiple shooters. That means that this was a conspiracy. Okay, there were multiple shooters, a crossfire. It also means that the government lied. okay, telling us it was Lee Harvey Oswald who was the sole assassin. Now, when Jack Kennedy came to Parkland Hospital, the doctors at Parkland Hospital knew immediately that Jack Kennedy was shot from the front. Okay, because they said there was a puncture wound in the throat. They could see this huge blowout of the back of the head. And that, to any doctor who had done any work in emergency rooms and seen gunshot wounds, knew exactly that was a frontal shot that caused the blowout on the back of the head. So Dr. Crenshaw, who was in the emergency room, said, he talked about, in a book that he wrote, talked about what he saw on November 22nd, 1963, the day of the assassination, when Jack Kennedy was brought into trauma room 1 at Parkland Hospital. So then I noticed that the entire right hemisphere of his brain was missing, beginning at the hairline and extending all the way behind his right ear. Pieces of skull that had not been blown away were hanging by a bloody matted hair. Based on my experience with trauma in the head from gunshot wounds, I knew that only a high-velocity bullet from a rifle could dissect the cranium that way. Part of his brain, the cerebellum, with the very back of his head, was dangling from the back of his head by a single strand of tissue, looking like a piece of dark gray, blood-soaked sponge that would easily fit in the palm of a hand. Okay, again, also, Dr. McClellan said about being in the trauma room 1, as I took a position at the head of the table that I've already described to help out with the tracheotomy. They tried to get Jack Kennedy breathing with a tracheotomy through the puncture wound, the frontal wound in his throat. I was in such a position that I could closely examine the head wound, and I noticed that the right posterior of the skull had been extremely blasted. It had been shattered, apparently by the force of the shot, that the parietal bone, the top bone on the top of your head, was protruded up through the scalp and seemed to be fractured along its right posterior half, the right half of the top of the head, fractured, as well as some of the occipital bone, back of the head, being fractured in this lateral half. And this sprung open the bones that I mentioned in such a way that you could actually look down into the skull cavity itself and see that probably a third or so cerebellum tissue had been blasted out. There was a large amount of bleeding, which was occurring mainly from the large venous channels in the skull, which had been blasted open. So the Parkland Hospital doctors gave a press conference and said Jack Kennedy was shot from the front. And now the government's put out the story that the shooting occurred by Lee Harvey Oswald from the Dallas, Texas School Book Depository, which was behind Kennedy when the shooting started. So now the government's got a problem. The body tells a different story.
Yeah, it's very dramatic, and I was just wondering when I read the part of your book, and I just was listening to you, that all this assassination, all these events happened in broad daylight. A lot of people were around, Secret Service people, just passerbys, ordinary people, and all kinds of people, also in the hospital. So how could the government, what power does the government has to cover up such a crime for such a long time? What does it mean besides the historical interest? Of course, it is important to know what happened more than 60 years ago, but I think this is not only for the correction of the history books, but also it connects a lot of today's our world, that do we really know what is going on in the world, in the politics, if that thing could happen?
Well, it's a remarkable story, and as I continue this, you'll see what the government did. The casket that was, by the way, the Secret Service they called a local funeral home and got a ceremonial casket delivered. Jack Kennedy was wrapped in sheets, his body, and his head was wrapped in sheets. They put him in the ceremonial casket, and the mortician at Parkland showed up with the justice of the peace, and they said, it's not a federal crime to kill a president, so this is a local murder. We're doing the autopsy. The Secret Service pulled their weapons and put these two, the justice of the peace and the corner up against the wall, and they took the body out of Parkland Hospital at gunpoint. They were not letting go of the body. Now, what happens next is remarkable, and it was fully documented by Douglas Horne, who worked on the Assassinations Records Review Board in the 1990s for several years and wrote a 5-volume on the medical evidence called Inside the Assassinations Records Review Board. He worked with us and wrote actually a preface to the book, an introduction to the book. The before the airplane left Love Field in Dallas, Kennedy's body was taken out of the ceremonial casket secretly and put into one of the storage compartments of Air Force One. We know this because at 6:30 p.m. that night, 6:35, Jack Kennedy's body arrived at the Bethesda Navy Hospital morgue. The autopsy wasn't to take place until 8 o'clock. Now, we know this because the body entered in a steel shipping casket. And when it was opened, Jack Kennedy's body was in a body bag, like in Vietnam, a body bag. Body was taken out of that, and he was naked except for a towel around his head. The point of it was government knew they had a problem. So the two doctors at Bethesda who were going to do the autopsy, Dr. Humes and Dr. Boswell, came out and they actually performed pre-autopsy surgery on the head to alter JFK's wounds. Now, this was witnessed by many corpsmen, Navy corpsmen who were there, as well as the mortician named Thompson from the funeral home that was going to prepare Jack Kennedy's body for the White House to be delivered later that evening. So before the 8 o'clock autopsy began, Humes and Boswell took the wound at the front of the head, and they actually cut it open widely, and the pictures are in the book, made it look like a kind of like a wing bed, like a frontal entry. They took a saw and they removed the parietal bone at the top of Jack Kennedy's head, and they messed around inside the head in order to remove any traces of metal that they could find. And so therefore, and by the way, so Paul O'Connor, one of the corpsmen, gave it first of all, these people are all under oath saying that they witnessed the pre-autopsy surgery. And one detail also that makes it clear that it happened, Paul O'Connor was one of the corpsmen, and he gave an interview. He said, at the back of the morgue opened up, and a crew of hospital corpsmen and a higher ranking corpsman, Dennis David, he was the guy who recorded all this in his duty notes, brought in a plain pinkish gray, what I call a shipping casket. It was not ornate. It was not damaged. It was just a pinkish gray casket. They brought it in the morgue and set it. We had 2 tables in the morgue, autopsy tables. They were back to front. They weren't side by side. They were back to front. They brought it up front where we were. At that time, we opened the coffin. Inside was a body bag. Now, William Matson-Law, who interviewed a lot of the corpsmen, said, "Are you sure there was a body bag?" Paul O'Connor, absolutely sure there was a body bag. We unzipped it quickly. Inside was a nude body with a bloody sheet wrapped around the head of the body. We lifted the body onto the table. That's not how the body of Jack Kennedy left Parkland. It had been altered. It was put into a new casket. Now, at 8 o'clock, they finally got the body back into the ceremonial casket. It's brought into the part of the morgue with the gallery. They take Jack Kennedy out of the ceremonial casket to begin the autopsy, and the audience gasps. We know this from a after-action report done by 2 FBI agents who attended the autopsy, a guy named Siebert and another one named O'Neill. And they wrote in the report that evidently Dr. Hume said there was, first of all, you see the head coming out of the way it was after all the pre-autopsy surgery. I'll try to show you a picture of it here in a minute. But when that comes out of the bat, everybody who knew anything about medicine saw that the parietal bone had been surgically removed in an autopsy fashion, had been sawed away. You take a saw cut, they lift it out, and the inside of the head had been messed with. This was obviously not a gunshot wound. And so if we take a look at the pictures, I'll try to find one here to show you, that it was obvious that the pre-autopsy surgery, and by the way, all that night during the autopsy, on November 22nd, 1963, the doctors at Bethesda got the doctors at Parkland on the phone, and they said that if they did not change their testimony to say that Jack Kennedy could have been shot from the back, that they were wrong about frontal shots, they would bring them before medical certification committees and they would lose their licenses to practice medicine. So the government began bludgeoning the doctors. They changed the nature of JFK's wounds with pre-autopsy surgery, and they lied about the entire thing. The x-rays that are forged they mask the back of the head with a part which, where the back of the head was blown away, the side of the head is all masked. You can't see what was really under it. And they implanted what looks like a 6.5 millimeter shell that is not there, was never seen at the autopsy, inside the back of the head to make it look like a Mannlicher Carcano bullet, the rifle that Oswald was supposed to have been used to do the assassination, which fired that round of that millimeter of a shell. So this whole thing was a complete alteration of evidence. When the limousine arrived at Parkland, Secret Service immediately take a bucket of water and start cleaning out the back seat. That's destroying a crime scene. People there noticed that there was a shot through the windshield, a frontal shot. When a bullet comes through safety glass, it makes a puncture mark going in, and the backside of it, where it's exiting, the glass bevels out and goes forward. That's a frontal shot. They knew it. So the Secret Service immediately cordoned off the limousine. They wouldn't let anybody photograph it, and they got it out of there quickly. So the government was covering up evidence in the very first minutes after the assassination, which makes this a coup d'etat.
It's incredible. Did you have the chance to share this new evidence, for example, with Robert Kennedy Jr., who is a presidential candidate in this year's presidential elections?
Yes, I did. I've spoken to Robert Kennedy about this. He asked for a copy of the book. I made sure we mailed it to his home. I know he received it. He acknowledged he received it and he would read it. And subsequently, those close to Robert Kennedy assigned a radiologist, Dr. Edward Fogarty, who's very accomplished as a radiologist, to examine independently the evidence. And he told Robert Kennedy that everything in the book was true, that he validated that the analysis was correct, which means that that Robert Kennedy's been correct from the beginning in saying the CIA killed his father. Within minutes of the assassination, there were worldwide bullets put out that were the complete background of Lee Harvey Oswald, that he'd been a Marine, that he defected to Russia. They made him look like a disgruntled, dissatisfied. That was prepared obviously by the CIA. What we've been watching is remember the Jim Carrey movie, The Truman Show,
yep,
where these people think they're living their lives, but they're really in a scripted play. Well, we've been living in a CIA, a military intelligence, and military industrial complex scripted life. Because in November 22nd, 1963, our deep state decided to kill a president and to take over, such that it makes you one. Jack Kennedy did not want to go to war. He didn't go to war in the Cuban Missile Crisis. He had signed directives that we were not going to go to war in Vietnam, and that was it. The military they wanted to go to war. There's billions of dollars going to be made going to war. And Curtis LeMay, who during World War II was the general who firebombed Germany and firebombed Japan, desperately wanted to go to war. He was known for smoking cigars. He was at the autopsy smoking his cigar. Their testimony of that under oath, and they said, "Put out your cigar." He blew smoke in their face. The generals were giving the orders at the autopsy what the doctors could and could not do. This was an entirely government organized and carried out execution, coup d'etat. And since then, I believe our government has been run not by the presidents, but by the military industrial complex with the intelligence agencies at the head. The press have gone along, not done their job. They've been bought and coerced to telling only the government lies. And what the military industrial complex has put us into is a series of perpetual wars. Now you've got to ask, why did 9/11, Why did buildings that were not hit by the airplanes collapse? Got to say, in the Iraqi War, 1991, why didn't we find any weapons of mass destruction for Saddam Hussein? Got to ask, why is it that a vaccine touted to be the solution to COVID-19 did not prevent people from getting the virus? We've been lied to by the government over and over again. We're being lied to today in a massive way. And what we're dealing with is a deep state is now ruling our country in the United States and probably all the countries of the world, EU included. So that the narrative is one which is constant conflict, constant wars, constant spending. It's not what the people want, it's what the deep state wants.
Does it mean that even during the 4 years of President Trump's presidency, this deep state was running the government, or was that a period when things started to change?
Nothing changed. All the deep state did. We even have Mike Pompeo, who's heading the CIA, admitting that he withheld information from President Trump. The bureaucracy, the deep state, the military were still in charge. They resisted Trump every step of the way. They had constant investigations. This Russian collusion, which I got involved with, the special prosecutor Robert Mueller thought I had a connection to Julian Assange. I was called before the grand jury. I gave the special prosecutor all my laptops, my cell phones. I cooperated. I did not have a tie to Julian Assange. It was, though, in August of 2016 during the presidential campaign. It was my 25th wedding anniversary. We went to a trip to Italy. I figured out on my own that Assange yet had Podesta's emails and was going to release them. I told that to Roger Stone. I knew what was in the emails because I knew Podesta, knew what he was going to do. So the FBI was sure I had a contact, and I was their last witness to tie Russian collusion to Trump. Because if I had a contact with Assange, then Roger Stone had it. Roger Stone and Trump were influencing Assange as to how to release the Russian stolen emails. Well, the Russians didn't steal the emails. I did not have a contact with Assange. So the special prosecutor finally said they were going to bring me before a jury in Washington, D.C. and say I had lied. I refused to give them my contact, and they were going to put me in prison the rest of my life. Well, I told them, finally, I said, I guess you'll just have to put me in prison the rest of my life because I cannot imagine standing before a judge and before God and swearing a lie to keep myself out of prison. I said, I won't do that. So they never indicted me. They were the ones lying, and they closed the Mueller investigation. But this is how they resisted Trump constantly.
The title of your previous book, Killing the Deep State, sounds relatively optimistic. Do you still think that deep state can be killed, can be stopped?
I am thinking Archbishop Vigano wrote a new preface to my current JFK book. I have 2 JFK books. The current one, The Final Analysis. He asked me to create. He asked to be created 3 years ago, the Anti-Globalist Alliance, and so in the recent months I've decided on my own initiative to create that, and I'm now writing a new book, which is called the Anti-Globalist Alliance Manifesto, and the subtitle is Ending the War on Humanity. These people are depopulationists. I think their plan is to have nuclear war. I think they created a virus and a vaccine to kill people. I think they are transhumanists, like Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum. They think with the small self-appointed oligarchy and their AI machines, they can plant computer chips in them, they can become transhuman, superhumans. And they, in their machines, can then enjoy all the resources of the world for themselves, the one world government. And most of us then are useless. They think there's too many people. They have no regard for God. And what they have is a depopulationist agenda. Henry Kissinger actually established a national security memorandum when he was working with Richard Nixon. National Security Memorandum 200, the depopulation, global depopulation, is still the official U.S. government policy. It's never been rescinded. So these maniacs want to kill billions of people. Now, can they be stopped? I have very deep religious conviction, and I believe that as long as God is sovereign, and these people will not win, they cannot win, God wins. And so therefore they will be destroyed. But I think we are going to go through a judgment of God because we've allowed God to be taken out of our schools, our homes, our lives, our marriages. We've killed millions of babies with abortion, getting chopped up in the womb. Only God can create life. Life is sacred. We have no right to kill babies in the womb. And these are sins against God. So I'm encouraging, when I'm ending all my podcasts, my new website, thetruthcentral.com, with encouraging people to go to a biblical remedy, which is 2 Chronicles 7:14, which says if we get down on our knees and ask repentance, God's forgiveness for all the sins we've committed here, and getting God out of our lives, killing babies, doing the horrible things we've done with these wars, that God will hear our prayer and heal our land. I think we're at the point of intervention by God. But if enough people wake up, and that's why this new book is so important, because I'm giving you indisputable proof that what we all thought was a lone gun assassin, we've been lied to with a massive government cover-up. The last appendix, my current book, The Final Analysis, is a CIA memo from 1967, which creates the idea of conspiracy theorist. It says anybody who disagrees with the Warren Commission's report, they will run a psychological operation on to destroy and to make cloudy their evidence. So far, that has not been done with this book. There's no way to refute what we have in this book. It's scientific measurements. And the frontal shots are absolutely clear from the front. Dr. Mantic thinks that the shot on the forehead was left there because it was probably a liquid mercury bullet and it could not be removed in the pre-autopsy surgery that Humes and Boswell did. So they had to leave obvious evidence of at least one frontal shot in the x-rays, which is, to any radiologist who looks at it, is absolutely clear that entered the forehead and did not exit the back of the head. One frontal shot refutes the entire government's theory.
Very remarkable. And you just mentioned Archbishop Vigano, who's wrote the foreword to your book, and that you are about to create a new anti-globalist alliance. Who do you want to connect with, for example, in Europe? And I also just want to mention that last week, just a couple of days ago, I listened to the interview that Tucker Carlson made with the Russian philosopher Alexander Dugin, and he spoke very similar things about the intention of those people who want to evolve the humanity in a new transhuman state. So it's very interesting to hear from different directions here in Europe that people are starting, as you and as Archbishop Vigano, as Alexander Dugin. They start to speak about these very worrisome new trends. So how do you plan to set up this anti-globalist alliance?
Well, I am public. It appears that it's possible my book will be published in Hungarian.
Look forward to it.
And I think several of my books now could be published in Hungarian. I'm planning to come to Budapest, and I want to be able to make some public appearances. I'd be delighted to meet with Orban, if that's possible, in order to really express these thoughts of the necessity to oppose this one world government. I see the EU breaking up, and there's going to be a desperate effort to keep it together. Right now, the European nations are talking about direct involvement, going to a war footing and going to be directly involved in Ukraine. Some of the weaponry that's being sent now to Ukraine is going to have to be operated by Germany or by the United States or by France. And that's going to involve no longer a proxy war, but a direct confrontation with Russia. And Russia has warned that if that's the case, it'll quickly go to a nuclear war. In fact, Russia's just announced they're going to start holding a new series of exercises, military exercises, which will include planning for the use of tactical nuclear weapons on the battlefield. These maniacs, these demons, I think it's satanic, actually. I think it's this neo-Marxism. I wrote a book called, the truth about energy, global warming, and climate change, which shows that this entire climate nonsense, the Earth is not heating up because of carbon dioxide from hydrocarbon fuels. That's climate nonsense. But it's again intended for us to stop using hydrocarbon fuels so we destroy our economies. Farmers can't farm. They're trying to they're trying to kill people. And so this is the second book in that series, which is Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy, is these people will produce anarchy. They'll produce conflict, gender confusion, disarray, or have people think there's nothing they can do. It's completely, we don't know what a woman is. We have to have, diversity, inclusion, etc. We've got admirals in dresses, having military exercises where they're more concerned about. I think our military today would be better able to run a transgender parade down Fifth Avenue than fight a war. And that's okay with them because they intend to have a transgender dominated military. Well, how insane is that? It's intentionally insane. You finally come to the conclusion that these people and Marxism can only destroy, can only kill life. And they're okay with that because they think they have to destroy the current state of traditional values, traditional families, in order to create their dystopian future where we're useless, we'll be under constant surveillance. If we don't obey, they'll cut off our money through, all our money will be gone in central bank digital currency, and our electronics won't work. We'll be confined to as far as we can walk. You won't be able to go outside of where you live. These are the people, the ideas they're proclaiming they want to do, they mean to do. And if they succeed, we will have a planet with 8 billion people going rapidly down to under 1 billion people, and they'll be very happy because they consider Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, these self-appointed geniuses, think that they are entitled to rule the world, and none of the rest of us have any rights here because they don't believe in God. They don't see, Harari, this Noah Harari, who speaks at the World Economic Forum, writes books, Sapiens, in which he says essentially, when you cut a human being open, you see the lungs and the brain and all the rest of the things and the organs. You don't see human rights. Human rights is a fiction. He doesn't think we have any because he doesn't believe in God. This is all an accident. So if it's all an accident, they have no regard for human life, kill it, make themselves transhuman. They'll merge with their machines. I think Bill Gates will become a computer code and he can live the rest of his life inside the machine. They'll be perfectly happy for him as long as he was conscious. And he thinks that can be achieved. This is insanity. It's Satanism.
It is truly. So you mentioned and that you are planning to come to Budapest. Sometimes people say that Hungary remained an island of anti-wokeness and a place where people are ready to listen to these ideas. So when you come, you surely have attentive ears and a very interesting audience. So we are looking forward to that.
Well, thank you. I'm going to come to Budapest, and I'm going to. I think I greatly admire what Orban has done. I think it's truly courageous, and I think that Hungary retains its Christian values. Hungary retains families, retains traditional values. We've got to get back to communities, get the agribusinesses out of agriculture and have small farms. We've got to be able to live locally. People don't live in a one world government unless they're, complete nutcases who think the World Economic Forum is normal with all the things that they want to conceive and talk about. They have no regard for human freedom or human rights. They want, anyone, the idea of our government funding gain of function research on diseases, which we now have to admit we did. And Anthony Fauci has been caught lying about this, and nothing's happened out at Anthony Fauci. It is barbaric. We've got a president. We have now what the deep state wants. If you couldn't have a weekend with Bernie where the president was actually dead and stuffed, so you have the next best thing, which is Joe Biden, who's obviously suffering from such senior dementia that the special prosecutor says he cannot even be indicted over possible crimes when he's vice president involving the use of classified documents. Well, as far as Barack Obama's concerned and the deep state, this is the perfect president because he doesn't even know what he's doing. They make the decisions. Putin was right in his interview with Tucker Carlson. Putin does not run Russia. Putin runs Russia, but Biden does not run the United States. He doesn't even know where he is half the time. He's too busy eating ice cream cones and sniffing a little girl's hair. It's a joke, except that this is the full culmination of this deep state, which I think has actually evolved in terms of psychological warfare into a counter state. In other words, I actually think this deep state now is intending to destroy the Constitution of the United States as a step, maybe the final step, to putting in place its dystopian New World Order. And I assure you that's a New World Order in which none of us want to live. And I'm doing my best, and others are, to make sure it doesn't happen. The best thing to make sure it doesn't happen, to tell people in advance this is what they're planning. And if you want to live in a situation where your children can be forced to, will convince the teachers convince them to go through sex change operations, which completely destroy their biological makeup before they've even reached puberty. And if you're the parent, you have no say. And I think when people realize that this is about protecting the children, that this movement will be rejected universally, and it needs to be sent back to hell where it belongs.
Sure. So it's been a great pleasure to talk to you and to inform our viewers these very troublesome trends. We are looking forward to meet you here in Budapest in our studio. Just one last quick question. Do you think that President Trump can return to the White House, or there will be some kind of tricks in this remaining 6 months ahead of us?
I'm confident that the next 6 months are completely unpredictable, and if this corrupt deep state or counter state thought that they could not steal the election because Trump have such an overwhelming majority, it would not surprise me to see their October surprise be nuclear war and then cancel the election.
Wow. So thank you very much, Dr. Corsi, talking to you. It's been a pleasure, and God bless you, and God bless your work, your family, and looking forward to see you in person. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. God bless you and your audience. God bless Hungary.
Thank you. Thank you for everybody joining us today. It was Dr. Jerome Corsi, best-selling author and political commentator with us today. And if you have a chance, just grab a copy of his book, Killing Deep State, and the new ones about the assassination, new evidence about the assassination of President Kennedy. It's been sold on Amazon and other book chains. So thank you very much. Have a nice day, and see you soon with other programs as well. Goodbye.